All right, so let's look at trigonometric ratios, finding a missing angle. If you haven't already, you should watch Finding the Missing Side, the last video, the introduction to these trigonometric ratios in SOHCAHTOA. So good news about this lesson is that it's very similar to last lesson. We're still looking at that SOHCAHTOA. So sine, cosine, and tangent. And these O's that you see stand for opposite side. These H's stand for the hypotenuse side. And these A's stand for the adjacent side. So looking at number 1, let's label the sides. So first, identify the angle that we're working with. Then follow it to the opposite side. So 7 is the O opposite side. 11 is the side that is next to the angle, so it's considered the adjacent side. So A. The side over here would be H, the hypotenuse. It's the longer slanted side. But since it's not labeled for us, we don't label it either. So leave that one blank. So we have the opposite side and the adjacent side, O and A. So when we look at SOHCAHTOA, pick the trig function that has the O and A. So that would be tangent TOA. It has the O and the A, just like our sides, O and A. So then you write out the trig function that includes tangent, and that is tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent, O over A. Then you plug in. We don't know the angle, so we're just going to put X there. The opposite side is 7. The adjacent side is 11. So you should know how to start these trig functions. If not, go back and watch the last video again. Now, this is interesting. To solve for the missing angle, we use the inverse of these ratios. So it's called the inverse of tangent. So to find that missing angle, X, how many degrees is X? In your calculator, you're going to hit the inverse of tangent, and it looks like this. TAN, tangent to the power of -1. That's called the inverse of tangent. And in the parentheses, you're going to put this ratio, 7/11. So in your calculator, you're going to put this, I'm going to box it in black here, put that into your calculator, and it will tell you the angle X. So here you can see my calculator. So to get the inverse of tangent, first you have to hit the second button. Here it's the orangish yellow button on mine. You hit second and then you hit tangent. And that will give you the inverse of tangent. And then in the parentheses you put 7/11, 7 divided by 11, hit enter, and it should give you 32.5 degrees. Round it to the nearest tenth. And that is how many degrees are in this angle. If you put this in your calculator and it didn't give you this answer, it's probably because your calculator is not in degrees mode. So you would need to hit this button, mode, and make sure that degrees is highlighted and not radians. Let's try number 2. All right, number 2. Solving again for that missing angle X. So I'll put a little rainbow there. First step, always label your sides. My long slanted side here is 8, which is my hypotenuse H. If I follow my angle out, I would find the opposite side, but since it's not labeled, we're not going to label it either. That must mean that 5 is a adjacent. Now that we have our sides labeled, go ahead and write SOHCAHTOA and then pick which trig ratio contains an A and an H. And that would be the middle here, CA, which stands for cosine. So write down the cosine trig ratio. Cosine of an angle equals A over H. Plug in X for my angle because I don't know what it is. A is 5, H is 8, over here on my triangle. Then to find X, the number of degrees, remember we're using the inverse functions to solve for angles. So you do the inverse of cosine of 5/8. So grab your calculator. Make sure you hit that second button first. Second cosine to get the inverse of cosine to pop up, and then put in 5/8. Don't forget to hit that second button first. Very important. You use this to solve for angles, not the sides, just for angles. And you should get 51.3, and that is degrees. So this angle here is 51.3 degrees. Let's try one more. Number 3. Right, first step, label your sides. 41, this side is the hypotenuse. It's the long slanted side. If I follow my angle out, I should hit the opposite side, and indeed I do. So this side is O. I'm going to leave that third side blank. Since they left it blank, I'm going to leave it blank as well. So let's write out SOHCAHTOA and figure out which trig ratio contains an O and an H. And right away you see that that is the first one. So sine, we label it, we write it, shorten it to SIN. Sine of my angle equals O over H. Just write out that formula first. You should have these memorized. Then start plugging in. My angle, remember this symbol stands for angle. My angle is just X equals the fraction O, which is 17, and H, which is 41. Here, your calculator is going to come into play. To find X, we do the inverse of sine. You always use that to find an unknown angle of my fraction, 17 over 41. So grab your calculator, hit the second button first, and then the sine button for the inverse of sine. Then put in your fraction, 17 divided by 41, and you should get 24.5 degrees.